In the 800s BC, the Celts living in continental Europe began to migrate to the British Isle, settling first in the coastal areas and then throughout the British Isle. Although over time they were divided into many different ethnic groups such as Welsh, Kernivec and Briton, they remained connected by language, religion and culture. As the island's trade with the European continent increased, people of various races began to migrate here and separations occurred in ethnic groups. BC. By 300, the Gauls who settled in the north of the island began to be called Scoti, which means Scots in Latin. In addition, the small island in the west that makes up Britain began to be called Hibernia, and the people living on the island began to be called Hibernian. The Roman Empire, which began to spread to all continents starting from 60 BC, expanded its domain to the coasts of Britain, thanks to Julius Caesar. Then he set his sights on the British Isle. In 55 BC, the Roman army led by Julius Caesar set foot on the island and started fighting the Britons. However, the Romans could not demonstrate the same success against the Britons as they did in Gaul and were only able to occupy a small region in the south of the island. Following Caesar's death, the Romans did not launch another expedition to Britain for nearly 100 years. In 43 AD, the Roman army, which took action to conquer Britain once again by the order of Emperor Claudius, began to advance towards the north of the island. Despite the fierce resistance of first the Britons and then the Scots, the Romans came to control more than half of the island. However, they never managed to occupy the entire island. The Romans, who ruled in Britain for many years, managed to impose their own culture and Christianity on the islanders. Although the Britons and the Scots rebelled against Rome from time to time, Rome's dominance over Britain continued until the 5th century. As the migration of tribes accelerated from the beginning of the 5th century, the Roman Empire began to weaken and even disintegrate. During this period, Angles, Saxons, Jutes and Frisians, who were members of the Germanic people, crossed over to Britain and began to settle on the island. As a result of this migration, which took place at a time when the Britons were just starting to get rid of the Romans, many wars occurred between the Germanic peoples and the Britons. As a result of these wars, the first Gaelic kingdom on the island, the Kingdom of Gwynedd, was established in 401. In 455, the Kingdom of Kent, an Anglo Saxon kingdom, was founded, followed by the Kingdom of Sussex, also an Anglo Saxon kingdom, in 477. Although the Britons started a fight against the Anglo Saxons, who gradually began to dominate the island, they were not very successful. As a matter of fact, from the early 6th century onwards, the Anglo Saxons expanded their dominance in Britain, establishing the Kingdom of Bernicia in 502, the Kingdom of Wessex in 519, the Kingdom of Essex in 527, and the Kingdom of Deira in 558. The British kings, who were saddened by the loss of their lands to the Anglo-Saxons day by day, realized that it was time to engage in an all-out war. Under the leadership of 3 kings named Coinmail, Condedin and Farinmail, many people from all cities of the country were called to military service, and these soldiers were gathered in Birmingham, the 3rd largest city in the country. Their first target was the Kingdom of Wessex. The Briton army, consisting of approximately 5,000 people, took action from Birmingham and faced the Wessex forces in the village of Durham in South Gloucestershire. The number of Wessex forces was approximately 3,000 against the 5,000 Britons. Although they were small in number, the soldiers in the Wessex army had more combat experience. Soldiers in the British army were engaged in farming, animal husbandry, he was a blacksmith or a merchant. So their real profession was not military service. That's why it didn't matter how many they were. As a matter of fact, the war that started in the morning ended around noon. Almost the entire Briton army was destroyed and 3 Briton kings lost their lives during the battle. This battle, which took place in 577 and went down in history as the Battle of Deira, was of critical importance in the establishment of Anglo-Saxon domination in Britain. After the war, the Britons sent word to their neighbors to the north, the Scots, asking for help against the Anglo Saxons. In the following years, Scots and Britons continued their joint resistance against the Anglo Saxons. However, they could not expel them from the country, nor could they prevent the establishment of two new kingdoms, Mercia and East Anglia. As the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms expanded their domains, the migration of Germanic peoples to the island increased significantly. By 600, the island's Briton and Anglo-Saxon populations were almost equal. Due to population growth, kingdoms felt the need to expand their borders. For this reason, they began to fight not only with the Britons, but also among themselves from time to time. The kingdoms of Bernicia and Deira in central Britain began a fratricide. This war, which started in 600 to dominate the region, lasted for about 50 years. Tired of fighting, the parties decided to sign peace and even join forces in 654. Thus, with the union of the two kingdoms in 654, the largest Anglo-Saxon kingdom on the island was established under the name of Northumbria. The second sibling war took place between the kingdoms of Wessex and Sussex. The kingdom of Wessex, which was militarily stronger and had a larger population, began to attack its neighbor at every opportunity starting from 630. These attacks intensified over time, causing the Wessex-Sussex War to begin in 680. After this 6-year war, the victorious side was Wessex, while the kingdom of Sussex collapsed and its lands passed to the kingdom of Wessex. There was also war between the kingdom of Mercia and East Anglia. In early 790, the kingdom of Mercia, wishing to expand its territory, began a campaign both east and west. After a 4-year war, the kingdom of East Anglia collapsed in 791 and its lands were occupied by the kingdom of Mercia. The kingdom of Mercia, which was successful in its campaign in the west as well as in the east, expanded its territory and became the strongest and largest kingdom in the British Isle. In 792, the Norse, also known as the Vikings, began attacking the Isle of Britain. The first attack was on a monastery at Dorchester, on the southwest coast. But this was a minor attack and it was just the beginning. Shortly after the first attack, the Vikings attacked the islands of Orkney and Shetland, massacring the islanders and settling in these areas themselves. In the following years, continued Viking raids disrupted both the political and social geography of the British Isle. During this period, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms should have cooperated and resisted the Vikings, but the opposite happened. The kingdom of Mercia, which wanted to dominate the entire island, declared war against the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in the south in 805. As a result of 7 years of fighting, the kingdom of Kent and the kingdom of Essex were destroyed and occupied by the kingdom of Mercia. The Mercia-Wessex Wars, fought for many years afterwards, caused thousands of people to lose their lives on both sides. The most well-known of these wars is the Battle of Ellendun, which took place in 805 and is very important for English history. At the Battle of Ellendun in Wiltshire, the Wessex army completely destroyed the Mercian army. Thus, the Kingdom of Wessex managed to break the Mercian hegemony and expand its territory, becoming the sole ruler of southern Britain. However, the war between the two kingdoms benefited the Vikings the most. As a result of the ongoing invasions, the Viking population on the island increased, and the kingdom of Northumbria, left alone against the Vikings, became very weak. As a matter of fact, when many Viking leaders joined forces and attacked the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, Northumbria in 867 and East Anglia, which was subject to Mercia, were occupied by the Vikings in 869. While the people of Wessex thought it was their turn now, King Ethelred was determined to defeat the Vikings. He reinforced his army, strengthening his striking force and convincing his soldiers that they were stronger than the Vikings. As a matter of fact, these efforts of the king were quite successful. The Wessex and Viking armies faced each other in Reading on January 4, 871, and fought in the early hours of the morning. The Wessex army, commanded by King Ethelred and his son Alfred, won the Battle of Ashdown and also managed to kill the famous king of the Vikings, Bagsecg. This victory stopped the Vikings from raiding the British Isle for a while. Shortly after the war, King Ethelred died for an unknown reason and was succeeded by his eldest son Alfred. The new king spent the first 5 years of his reign protecting the Wessex lands inherited by his father and building a strong army against the Vikings. Meanwhile, the Vikings, led by the famous King Guthrum, continued to invade the kingdom of Mercia and expand their territory. The Vikings, who set out on another expedition against Wessex in January 878, managed to occupy most of the country. However, King Alfred managed to recover in a short time and appeared against the Vikings with a strong army on May 6, 878. While the Viking army led by King Guthrum numbered 4,000, the Wessex army led by King Alfred numbered 6,000. As a result of the war that lasted for 6 days, King Alfred of Wessex managed to defeat the Vikings this time and destroyed almost the entire Viking army. Viking leader Guthrum accepted Christianity after this defeat, and was forced to withdraw completely from Anglo Saxon territory. This success of King Alfred enabled the kingdoms of Wessex and Mercia to join forces and fight jointly against the Vikings. At the same time, these successes put him in English history as Alfred the Great. Until the death of Alfred the Great in 899, the kingdoms of Mercia and Wessex managed to establish superiority over the Vikings in the British Isle. Following Alfred's death, his son Edward ascended to the throne of the Kingdom of Wessex. The Kingdom of Wessex, which continued its rise during the reign of King Edward, gradually began to annex the weakening Kingdom of Mercia into its territory. As a matter of fact, upon the death of King Ethelred of Mercia in 911 and Queen Ethelflaed in 917, the lands of Mercia were included in the Kingdom of Wessex. King Edward then began to strengthen his northern borders against the Viking kingdom. Following the death of King Edward in 924, his son Athelstan ascended to the throne of the Kingdom of Wessex. Unlike his father, King Athelstan did not wage war with the Vikings and signed a peace treaty in January 926. He even arranged for his sister to marry the Viking king Sihtric. The two kings signed an agreement not to invade each other's lands or support each other's enemies. However, when King Sihtric died for an unknown reason the following year, King Athelstan of Wessex easily invaded the Viking lands. Then, in 927, he united all the local governments on the island and established the Kingdom of England. The Kingdom of England ruled as the sole ruler of the British Isle for approximately 100 years.